Hi guys and welcome back to my YouTube channel. For today's video I'm going to show you how I created the leather in this portrait here. I hope you enjoy. So as always I'm going to start off by studying my reference photo and looking where I can see all the different tones and colours. There's a lot of dramatic lighting in this portrait, so there's lots of bright highlights and then really dark shadows contrasting against each other. So I'm just going to erase some of my graphite lines. So I'm just lifting them off with my putty eraser, just so I can barely see them, so they don't show through my colour pencil. So I'm just going to work on this little section first. So I'm going to start off a little differently to what I do with the fur. I'm going to mark in my darkest areas first. So I'm just going to start with a Payne's Grey and mark in where all the shadows are. This sort of helps my eye figure out where all the different parts and details are going to be in the leather. So I'm just putting in all my darkest values first, and I'm only using a light pressure. I don't want to go straight in with the black. I'm just very lightly using my Payne's Grey just to mark in the darkest parts. So this is mainly the shadows from the little keepers on the reins. So even when I'm doing this, I'm still studying my reference photo and looking back every few seconds, making sure I am getting the shapes right. So I like working in sections, a lot of you will know, so I'm only going to work on these three areas first, up to the buckle, and then once I've got these parts done, I'll move on. And I like to work with quite a sharp pencil when I'm doing these areas. So now I've got those parts marked out, I'm going to go in with a Coal Grey 3. So there's lots of cold tones in the leather, because the leather looks quite blue, so you know it's you'd be using your colder colours rather than any warm colours. So I'm just going to lay down this Coal Grey 3 very, very lightly. And there's a highlight by here, so I'm just leaving that white at the moment. And I'm going to add more layers where the darkest parts are. You've always got sort of this highlight going around the edge of leather, so I'm leaving that lighter as well. And there's not a lot of detail that will be going on to this leather. The reference photo hasn't got much detail on it. There's more just you can see shapes of parts because of the lighting. So it's all very much going back and forth when I'm working. I do little sections, but then I also go back to sections that I've previously done and alter as I go. So I'm using the Payne's Grey now to go back into my dark areas. Again, I'm not using too much pressure. I'm sort of using a circular motion. Very small circles. to make sure the pencil blends and gets into the tuss of the paper. I'm going to use my coal grey one, and where the lightest areas are, I'm just going to blend all these colours together into each other. And I am using a slightly harder pressure now. I always use a harder pressure when I'm blending together. I'm going to go back with my Payne's Grey and keep adding. Now I'm going to go in with my black for the darkest areas, so this will mainly be the shadows. And I am using quite a hard pressure now just to really burnish that into the page. And then back to my Coal Grey 3, and I'm sort of going to darken these highlights a little more. I always make sure I start out quite light, and then if I need to go darker I can always add on top. Whereas if I go too dark too soon, it's always harder to lighten then. So I'm just going back and forth until I've sort of got the look that I'm trying to achieve. So that's those keepers done for now. I'm going to move on to the little round part here. So I'm going to go my Coal Grey 3 first. I'm just going to sharpen him. And lightly colour around here. It's quite dark here and then it's light just as it comes out of the keeper. So I'm going to leave that white for now. And then use my Coal Grey one for that area and sort of blend them together. Then go back with my Coal Grey 3 and just add another layer on top. And now I'm going my Payne's grey. Just going to sharpen this. So I like to keep the pencils really sharp when I'm working in very small detailed sections. So in the darkest area here, I'm using like a medium pressure. And then as I come out into the middle, I'm decreasing the pressure. Sort of lifting my pencil off the page a little more. Just to get a nice little gradient. I'm going to use my Cold Grey 3 and sort of blend those areas together so it's nice and soft. And then overlap into that Cold Grey 1. I'm going to sharpen the Cold Grey 1. And around here, just add it in over the top, try and sharpen up that little line. Same up here. There you go. And now I'm going to work. It's quite hard to see in the reference photo. There's sort of a keeper by here from where I can make out. And then the shadow. So I'm going to sort of lightly mark it out with my Payne's grey. So before I go in and add more details, I'm just going to carry on adding in the dark tones of the rest of the rain, just so it sort of helps my eye to judge where everything is going. And I'm going to go with my Cold Grey 3. Just going to sharpen him up again. Again, light pressure, just build up the layers. And leave in white where there's the bright parts. And I'm going to go back with my Payne's grey, sharpen him again. And start adding in some of the darker tones. You can see I'm very back and forth again with my work, but this is just my preferred way of working. I know artists might use a different method, or you might use a different method, and that is totally up to you, as long as you're getting the results that you want. So I know I'm working quite backwards to what I usually do. I usually start on my lighter colours first, my lighter tones, and then I go in with my darkest. I'm sort of mixing it up a little bit, just because that's what I feel like doing, I suppose. And if it's working, then it's working. I've almost got the shape of this part now. I'm just going to sharpen up my black and sort of define the edges. And add in just a little bit more, because it is very dark around this edge. There we go, and now we've got this strap coming down here. I'm going to start off with the cold grey 3, and then we'll work on the buckle, and then we'll start the rest of the grackle noseband as well. So there's like a little strap by here, so I'm going to leave that out for a moment. Just going to go in with the cold grey 3 very lightly and just cover that. And keep looking back at my reference to see how dark I should go. So I'm going to use the Payne's Grey, and I'm sort of going to work the way down the middle and leave the edges light. And this little strap here has a shadow, so I'm just going to add in that shadow quite dark. And then lightly work my way down the middle and keep the same thickness all the way down those two edges of the strap. I'm just going to define the edges of the strap. There you go, and I'm going to use the cold grey 3 just to blend the Payne's Grey out a little, make it look nice and smooth. I can see this little keeper here needs to be blended a bit more. I'm always going back to previously done parts of my work and going back and seeing things that need to be altered a bit or sort of neatened up. So now on my reference photo, the buckle area looks almost white. So I'm just going to use my cold grey 1 and start adding this in the darker areas and see how I go and how it looks. Probably use the I'm not sure. Maybe the mouse grey of the Pablos pencil, because it's got quite a blue tone to it as well, a very, very cold blue tone. I'll just use it very lightly. Just to add a tiny bit of a blue tone to it. And then I'm going to use the Payne's Grey just to darken these shadows and add the shadow around that part there. There we go. So now I think we're going to move on to the grackle noseband. So I'm just going to show you how I do this strap next. So I'm just going to tidy up my paper. There's little bits of pencil dust, which is really important to make sure you get away. So I'm just always using my putty eraser to get any of the pencil dust off the page. You don't want any dirty smudges or marks. So I'm just going to go over the strap and try and take some of the graphite lines off, just so I can barely see them. So now I think I'm going to start with, I will start with the coal grey one, but just on the light areas that I can see, just to mark it out. So down here I started with my darkest tones. It all depends on how I feel. I'm not really sure why I choose to start differently, but for this one I'm going to start with my lightest, just to sketch out where everything's going. And then go in my coal grey 3. And I'm just lightly sketching in where my darkest tones are. Just going to sharpen him up. Now there is a bright highlight here, so I'm sort of working in the darkest areas on either side and then sort of making a gradient towards the centre where the highlight is falling. I'm going to use the Payne's Grey. Just going to sharpen him. So I'm using harder pressure towards the dark areas and then lighter pressure where it's lighter. And I'm shading in the direction of the leather as well, so I'm meeting in the middle. So my pencil lines are sort of following the curve of the leather. And then back with my Coral Grey 3 and sort of blend this Payne's Grey into the middle, and I'm using a medium pressure. And then back to my Coral Grey 1 and then blend these into the middle. Just going to sharpen them again. And now again I'm going to go back to my Payne's Grey and start darkening this area again. And I'm going to keep darkening until it looks like the reference photo. So again, I'm using a harder pressure in the darkest areas, and then as I'm coming out, I'm sort of lifting my pencil and brushing it into the highlighted area. And then back to my Coral Grey 3. And I'm overlapping the colours as well and really blending them into each other. So I'm going to sketch in with the Payne's Grey the shadow underneath. Because there is like the light part on the edge of the leather. I'm just doing this very gently, making sure I keep the same thickness all the way down. You want a very sharp pencil to do this and use a very light pressure. And then once it's done, then you can start darkening with a harder pressure. This will eventually be black. I will use the black over the top, but I wanted to use the Payne's Grey first, just in case I made a little error and it'd be easier to erase. And because it makes a nice an underlayer as well. I'm going to do the same on the other side, but with the Coral Grey 3, because there's no shadow under there, but it is defined. So I'm going to do it very lightly. And I'll sort of use his coat to define it a bit more when I add his coat in here. I'm just going to use the black to sort of get this really dark area by here, and the shadow where it meets into the middle section of the noseband. Now we're going to move on to it's still the same strap, but the part that is coming around from the other side. So I can see the very dark shadow. So I'm just going to put that in with the black. And then we've got the keeper that comes around. And I'm just going to add in this dark shadow. I'm going to use the Coal Grey 3 now to sort of map out where this keeper goes. It's quite hard to see on his mouth now. There's very, very bright highlight shining, so you can't see much of the detail. I'm going to mark in this area the Payne's Grey. And then the Coal Grey 3. So again, I'm looking at where the dark parts are and just marking in. I'm going to use the Payne's Grey to further darken that. And I've also got it very sharp to do a nice crisp edge along here. And then blend it into the Coal Grey. So I'm going to go back and work on the keeper. Just going to sharpen it. And then follow the strap down around his mouth. This is very dark down here. It sort of changes into a much warmer tone. So I think I'm going to switch to my my warm greys and my dark sepia for this. I'm using a warm grey 5 right now. I think I'm going to use the warm grey either 3 or 2. I'm going to use the warm grey 2. For this lighter section. I'm also going to use it for this highlight as well. And I'm going to use the dark sepia for the darkest area. And there we go, that's how I draw my leather. I think it is pretty much done. But I probably will go back over it again and check over that I've got everything drawn in and got all the details correct and the tones right. So I'm just going to zoom. There we go, you can see. So now I've just got this small section here and then onto his bit, and then I can finish the rest of him. So I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope this was educational for you and you've all learned something. Thank you all for watching. Bye! So that was it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and there will be more videos coming soon, so press that subscribe button and give me a like, and I shall see you in my next video. Bye!